So, guys, welcome. This is another new session in IFSO. And as you can see here, the name of this session will be IFSO Talks. What do we have here? Okay, guys, so this is a new session. Raul, come here, please. And will be a session that will be a surprise to you. It's a surprise to me because I don't know the talks of these guys here. But we are here talking about something new. We are talking about innovation. That's my talk. Let's talk something about innovation. And I think that innovation is something very important that you can see here. Without innovation, what kind of mobility we will have. So you can see that cars had a lot of evolution, innovation over time. But sometimes we have problems with innovation. We have to consider, and we have in medicine and in bariatric surgery, I think we have to use some rules in order to innovate in the proper way. So let's talk about innovation in bariatric and metabolic surgery. Do you think we need innovating bariatric metabolic surgery? Of course we need, because at the contrary, we continue doing jejunal ileal bypass, or we continue doing surgery by open approach, as you have here. So innovation, it is important. The beginning of this year, they invited me to do a presentation about the good, the bad, the ugly, about innovation. And immediately I remember the movie with Clint Eastwood. And so I asked my assistant, can you help me to prepare? I have to prepare a presentation about the good, the bad, the ugly in innovation. Can you help me with that movie with Clint Eastwood? And in that time, you see that you are becoming older, because my assistant told me, what movie? Who is Clint Eastwood? So you see that you are becoming older over time. But innovation, it is the proposal of something new, something innovative. But we have to have some compensation to innovate. So in surgery, we should have something more effective, something easier, with better result, faster, cheaper, reproducible, less invasive. So what kind of benefit? Some innovation can come with some benefit. But it's very important that we have to keep the same safety and the safe benefits that we have up to this time. So is this some form of deviation of the standard practice? And innovate in medicine, innovate in surgery will be based in the surgeon to have an hypothesis about a new device, about a new technique, and this will have the surgeon, the patient, the hospital, the clinic, the center where we will have the innovation, and of course, we need some regulation, because you could see that that proposal about lobotomy to treat depression is not a good proposal, but that was really. Innovation involves the progress of the medicine. We will improve the quality of life with medicine. But every time we have an idea, there is some risk. And the more we calculate, no matter how much we calculate, we have some risk. But in this case, the risk is not for us. The risk is for the patient. So this will involve some experimentation. Patient harm is a concern. we have to look to work in a very good informed consent, financial concerns, conflicts, compliance. That's something important in innovation. And we have some rules about that. We have to look for a potential beneficence of what we are proposing. And we have to look for no maleficence, primum non nocere. To preserve the patient is the first issue in innovation. And that should be based in a very complete informed consent and a total autonomy of the patient to decide about to participate or not in that study. And it's important because the first cases will take the double of the risk. We'll have a new procedure, and that team, that surgeon, is not skilled in that kind of technique. So I think that when we look for the rules about doing innovation, we should look for the rules about doing innovation in the pharma, in the industry of drugs, because they have that kind of rules very, very well fundamented. So they start with preclinical studies, laboratory studies in vitro, animal studies. After that, they go for the phase 1. The phase 1, in general, of the study of a drug involve healthy volunteers. Are not people with the disease. They are healthy volunteers for doing the study about the procedure. And that will be a very small group of guys in order to test the safety and the dosage of the drug. After that, they go for the phase 2. The phase 2 will involve patients, will involve people with the disease. The group will be bigger, 100, 300 patients, and the main goal is to evaluate the effectiveness of the procedure in the side effects in this small group of patients. After that, phase 3, again, this group are patients with the disease, they are volunteers, and it is a group with more patients. It's a big group. And again, the issue, the goal here is to check the effectiveness of the procedure. After that, if they have all the approvals, they can have FDA reviewer about the drug and approval. And after FDA review and approval, they go to the phase 4, that is the use of the drug, but they will monitor a big group of the patients to see in a big group if they can identify something that didn't happen in a small group. So you could see that we go movement by movement. But look, we are surgeons, and surgeons in general, they don't accept well regulations because they think they are the best. We are the best soccer team of the world. And look, that was the result. I'm not happy with this because I am Brazilian, but that's my team. So surgeons, they don't accept strict regulation because they think that will limit the benefit they can offer for the patients, because they are pretty sure that that idea is a very good idea and they should offer to the patients. They should offer the benefit of this idea right now on Monday, on Tuesday, for the next patient. So the proposal for a new device or a new procedure is going step by step according to the approval of drugs. Step 1, that will be a proof of concept. I have an idea, and I go for this group of these guys. They are the experts in bariatric surgery. I will tell, look, I'm thinking about doing a straight connection in between the antron and the sigmoid. Do you think, Raul, that will be a good idea as a good metabolic procedure, a gastro-sigmoidostomy? So let's go for a group of experts and listen the opinion of them about our idea. If they agree of that, I think we are authorized to move with a pilot study, an animal pilot study. After that, so this is the preclinical research. Let's do some study. It's not a human study, and let's see if my idea is really a good idea. Okay, that's work in this preclinical research, so let's do a restricted group of study, a restricted clinical research, step 3. This will be a small number of patients, and the main goal is to demonstrate technique or device safety. Step number 4, expanded clinical result. I have a good result in the lab. I have a good result with animal. I have good result in step 1, 2, and 3, so I can go to step 4. That is a expanded study. We will have more patients involved in the project. And after that, we will finish with a randomized control trial. If we go for these 5 steps, I'm sure that we are protecting our patients and we'll have better results. So, to conclude my presentation about innovation in bariatric metabolic surgery, the good. This will benefit over the standards. We will offer some benefit over the standards we have, but we have to keep the standards we have right now. We have to go for more results. We will improve outcomes. We will offer better results to our procedure with lesser advanced events. We will be cheaper. We will be mini-invasive. We will increase the interest in our procedures and will help us to remove barriers. The bad is a potential cause to harm patients. We can have complications. Even we can have mortality associated to our proposal. Will impair the quality of life. Results should be reported, should be analyzed. We can have nutritional problems. We can need revisional procedure for these patients, and this can compromise the reputation of bariatric metabolic procedure. And the ugly, it is the improbity, the immorality about doing procedures that are not approved without the adequate approvals of our IRBs, the selfishness of the surgeons, the exacerbated ego of the surgeons, the compliance with products and companies, financial conflicts, lack of concern, misconduct. Don't keep our original concept of doctors and surgeons are looking more in their own benefit. This is Almino Ramos technique. I'm looking for that. So to finish, let me remember our Hippocratic oath. As a member of the medical profession, I solemnly pledge to dedicate my life to the service of humanity. The health and the well-being of my patient will be my first consideration. I will respect the autonomy and dignity of my patient. I will keep the respect for human life. Thank you so much, and let's go straight for my friend Abderrahman Nimeri. Let's see. I'm curious, Nimeri.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Almino, for the opportunity to speak today at this session and for leading us through this past year and pushing everyone within the IFSO organization to do better and to try their best. If you can have my slides up. So I thought today I would talk to you.
You're pretty.
Okay, thank you. So I thought today I would talk to you about something near and dear to my heart, which is surgical training and how we can actually train surgeons today in 2019, just like other specialties train their people. And I chose musicians, but you could actually apply this to many other specialties and you'll see the same thing. This is my disclosure slide, has no relevance to this presentation. If you look at this picture and you look at the people in this picture, most of you will associate genius with the people in this picture. And many of us, when you see someone that you think is very talented, a good tennis player, a good soccer player, an expert surgeon, or a very good business person, or even someone in the media, you'd actually correlate that with their genetic abilities, with their upbringing, with where they're from, rather than the hard work they've done for years to actually get to the level of where you see them. You see them making the 3 points at every game, but you do not see the thousands of hours that were done to get to those 3 points. You don't see the failures before you see the successes. We tend to see the success and value the success. And I think in surgery, we're the same thing. In this talk today, I want to actually try to talk to you about the fact that when you see someone who's an expert next time, think about something called deliberate practice. And I think I'm going to try to introduce you to this in surgery. This is actually what we do in our fellowship program when we train fellows. We do something called deliberate practice. And in the next 10 minutes, I'll try to talk to you about why do I think when someone is so experienced and so good, it is not their genetic abilities. This is called the West Berlin violin student study. This is, I think, to music, what the Swedish obesity study is for us in bariatric surgery. Included only 40 people. 10 of the best potential violinists from the best school in West Berlin, 10 that were scored by their professors as average, and 10 students from an average school that is in West Berlin, but it's not considered a great school, against 10 very accomplished violinists in one of the biggest symphonies in West Berlin. And they wanted to see, could you actually look back and figure out how do they get to where they are? So they looked at these people and asked them many questions. When did you start playing the violin? They asked them specifically how many hours they practiced every week, how much leisure time they did. They asked them if they participated in competitions. They asked them if they kept a diary, and they asked them to keep a diary for several weeks. And then they asked them if they actually had specific tips when it comes to playing the violin, specific things. We don't have to go to them, but things that a musician would know. And then finally, they asked them if practice was fun. Did they have fun practicing? Well, they found that most people had more leisure on the weekend. That's expected. But they also found that when you started practice correlates the most with if you are among the 10 best or those 10 accomplished teachers. When did you start practice? Did you start at age 4 versus age 7 versus age 13? So when you started was one of the most important factors. What else did they find? They found also that the best keep very good diaries with their memory. The diaries correlate with what they did. When they asked them first about their memory and then they watched them in their diaries, it correlates very well. And they could actually find that the numbers of hours and years of practice correlates with perfection. It is not any genetic talent. Those 10 best students and those 10 best professors could actually established in music just by the number of hours. And they identified 10,000 hours by 20 years. And many people got stuck to that idea. Malcolm Gladwell is one of the people who popularized this idea in his book, Outliers. But today I want to talk to you about something further than just 10,000 hours. You could also see that the least amount of hours you did correlates with how you did at the end. So let's take running. Many of you run, and if you run the same way, 5 days a week, you run for an hour or two, you run for 3 years, you might not improve. How do you improve? You need to get something called deliberate practice. What does it mean? It means you have feedback. So if you're putting, ever played golf, and I give you 100 golf balls and you start putting towards the hole, by the time you reach ball number 60 or 70, you're getting a pretty good muscle memory or how to hit the ball. But if I covered the hole, you would not improve until you reach the 100th ball because there's no feedback. So feedback has to be objective. Think, do we get objective feedback when we're trainees? Feedback has to be done by a coach who's an expert in the area. Feedback has to be with specific lessons you have to go do on your own, on your specific weaknesses. It has to be educational and does not involve yelling and does not involve putting pressure on people. And then finally, you have to have specific pre-designed goals. What I didn't tell you in the violent study, everybody did not enjoy practice. All those very good students had enough grit to put up with practice. They didn't enjoy it. But when they reach the level of being an expert, everything flows, but at the time of practice, it's not enjoyable. Let's take something like competence. Every one of us goes from being incompetent in a task to being competent, and people say there are 4 stages. So initially, if we take driving a car, if you ask your 3-year-old in the back seat, can you drive the car? They will tell you absolutely. They can't even reach the gas pedal, but absolutely they could drive. They're incompetent and they're not aware of their incompetence. But if you ask your 13-year-old, they'll tell you no. I'll probably kill everyone. How can I drive a car? I can't drive a car. They're still incompetent, but they're aware of their incompetence. But if you ask your 16-year-old who just got the driver's license, she or he will tell you, don't talk to me, I'm concentrating. Because they're competent, but they're so conscious about their competence. But each one of us drives to work while they're texting. And we get to work and we have no idea how we got there. We're competent, but we're not conscious about our competence. We as surgeons are the most dangerous in the 4th stage. Because you get complacent, because you get used to doing everything, because you're so competent that you don't think about the surgery anymore. So let's take, for instance, what does this have to do with bariatric surgery? So let me tell you. William Halsted in the US is one of the people who were most influential in surgical education. And the adage is, see one, do one, and teach one. But the reality is you see too many cases with very little instructions. You do cases with very subjective feedback that makes you feel awful, feel like you have no idea, that you'll never make it. And then when you're asked to do one, you frustrate the staff, you frustrate the faculty, and the surgery takes too long because there's no structure of training. If you look at the bariatric surgery volume we do today, sleeve gastrectomy has become the best procedure, the most common procedure. And I will tell you, I don't think it's because other procedures like Roux-en-Y gastric bypass are more risky, and I don't think it's because of outcomes only. It's because the learning curve of a procedure like Roux-en-Y gastric bypass laparoscopically is very steep. And we have to do something about that steep learning curve. Why do I say that? I propose to you that the creation of a gastrojejunostomy in a small pouch and the creation of the jejunojejunostomy is the reason Roux-en-Y gastric bypass is falling out of favor. And I'll explain to you what I'm saying. If you look at this picture, sleeve gastrectomy, one anastomosis gastric bypass, and Roux-en-Y gastric bypass are like a scooter, a skateboard, and a ripstick. Why do I say that? Sleeve gastrectomy has resection without anastomosis above the colon. That's the easiest thing to do because you don't have to worry about placing the ports in a correct position. You can put them anywhere, it will work. One anastomosis gastric bypass involves resection with anastomosis, but only one anastomosis, only above the colon, and most surgeons don't close the defect. Roux-en-Y gastric bypass is resection with anastomosis above and below the colon, and you have to close the defects. That's where the learning curve is a problem. The learning curve is not the same. So unless we find a way to train people in the procedures, we cannot expect similar outcomes. Let's look at laparoscopic colectomy. In 2004, the COST trial came to show that when it comes to colon cancer, laparoscopic and open colectomy are equal. But today in 2019, only 30% of colectomies for cancer or not are done laparoscopically, despite all the effort of the Laparoscopic Society. So why is creating the anastomosis so difficult? Placing the ports, intracorporeal anastomosis, lining the bowel, super obesity. And we know from the Swedish study looking at internal hernia that when you look at 2,500 patients, yes, internal hernia long-term is lower when you close the defects, but earlier there are more JJ obstructions because of learning curve. So what's the solution? It is not robotic surgery. The solution is more training. What do I mean? The solution is focused, objective, deliberate practice. Let me explain to you. You have to teach people how to put their ports. You have to teach them mechanisms of intracorporeal suturing. You have to teach them exactly how to close the defects. And what I'm proposing, and I'm going to show you in the next 2 minutes, is the following. When it comes to port placement, you cannot put the first port in the midline without knowing where the target organ is. The first port goes in the left upper quadrant, so you can put the camera where you need it. We do not do open cholecystectomy standing on the left side, nor we do it through a McBurney's incision. So you should not put your visual trocar without looking on the inside. See where the falciform is, and similarly the other ports. Each port has to be placed based on inside anatomy, looking at with their JJ, and the most important port is the port you're going to use for your right hand for the JJ. Has to be low enough to be able to actually allow you to do the anastomosis. So to conclude, you also have to show people how to use the stitch, where to put the sutures when they close create the enterotomy, how much room they have. You have to show people specifically where to put the enterotomy. If you look at most people, ask them how the enterotomy looks, they will tell you the enterotomy looks like a circle, and if I put just sutures like this, I'll close it. The reality is the enterotomy does not look like a circle. When you put sutures like that, you end up with a dog ear and end up with a leak. The enterotomy means you need to close wide sutures between 12 and 6 o'clock and short sutures between 6 and 12 o'clock. And this short video illustrates what you have to show people first by video as trainees. Then you show them what you're talking about. Then they come to the OR and get specific time where they get to work with specific instructions. So again, it has to be feedback that is objective by an experienced coach. They have to spend time in the simulation lab in between sessions, and it has to be in an educational environment with specific goals. So, to conclude, the next time you see someone that's very talented, don't think genetic abilities, but think deliberate practice. Thank you very much.
Dear President and distinguished IFSO leader, ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate this chance to talk here. And my talk, I'm from Taiwan, Asian Pacific, so my talk will relate to something philosophy in Oriental China. So my talk is use your Tao to serve the world. And the story beginning in this IFSO APC meeting, April in China. You can see the president of APC at the final, they present a 4 Chinese calligraph. It's called 道济天下, and in translation, is use Tao to help the world. And at that time, Ramos asked me what is the meaning of this word, and I don't have really time to explain. So I would like to do it today, and with some perspective. So what is a Tao? Tao, I think, is the essence of Chinese philosophy. And its field, the Tao is field in all university. And it's the way, the path. And the principle of nature is full in all university. It's balanced by yin and yang, but you cannot see it, you cannot feel it. However, it runs the sun and runs the season. And it nurtures everything. But we don't know its name. So we just call it Tao. So the Tao, you can see this calligraph. Here is the essence of, I think, the whole Oriental philosophy. But Tao is not only big in the whole university, also in every human being. So you can see in the Indian, they say Buddha in everyone, because we coming from heaven, and with a spirit coming to this earth and in a physical body, that is a place with temporary storage. And we will leave this body someday, and the spirit will go back to heaven. And no matter what kind of religions, they tell us the same story and same thing we need to do. So that is also the Tao. So you need to find your Tao. If you find your Tao, then you will find a light in the blind. So you will see your whole life and you will see the future. So what is the Tao with any relation with our bariatric surgery? Yes, I think it's a blessing for bariatric surgery because obesity is a serious problem now, we all realize. And surgery is the most effective. They can treat a lot of patients. So it's also a blessing of the patient. But remember, it's a blessing for we, bariatric surgeons. So when I look back my 40 years journey in surgery, I really love the journey in bariatric surgery. So you can see, as the first talks, they told you, practice. Yes, when we come into a surgery field, we all spend a lot of time practice our skill, try to be a master of this field. You can see I'm standing beside my teacher. This is Professor Chen. He taught me the open BBG surgery. And also you can see I tried to do my PGA professional, but I quit quite earlier because I realized I'm not the guy. So I still focus on the surgery. Then the important is next 10 years. I have so many questions in my surgical career, so I decided to go into my PhD program. And at that time, I pioneered a laparoscope. I learned the technique from the San Francisco. So I joined the advanced workshop at 1994. Then the middle is the Professor Brady Caddy from Harvard University. He teaches me the surgical oncology. And also Professor Mason, he teaches me about bariatric surgery. So the next 10 years, I think is very important. Surgery is not a technique. We need to practice over our knowledge, our science. So it's a science for surgery. So I talk about a study. I think there's a great talk about a study just behind me by Nimra. But I think in Chinese, 1,000 years ago, this famous doctrine of means, he told us how you should learn, the attitude. So I will quote here is, the first thing you need to learn is you need entire sincerity. With the sincerity, you will become ceaselessly. That's most of surgeons are doing. Not ceasing, it contains no. So continue long is the evidence itself. So evidence itself, it reaches far. Then reaching far, it becomes large and substantial. As this is the end of study goal. Then a larger substantial, it becomes high and brilliant. So this is a wisdom from our old ancient, and is perfect match to the recent theory. So then the third decade, what I'm doing is like just many bariatric surgeons, they start to build a multidisciplinary team and try to build a center. So in 1998, I built the first multidisciplinary bariatric center in Asia. In these 20 years, we treated more than 7,000 patients, and we try a lot of new procedures and contributing in this field. But most makes me happy, I think, is the recent decade, when I have time and I try to teach and try to serve the world. So surprisingly, I think the most thing made me happy is science research, especially over bariatric. I still remember when I go into a bariatric surgery, it's a very effective treatment for obesity and many, many theory and technique and procedure. However, there's not many science at that time. So I try to contribute something. So this is a paper last year, quite surprisingly. I found I myself become the first publisher in this field. The name after me is all master. So Schauer, Nicoyan, Garnier. So it's quite a surprise. I'm not so great. I just try my best to give some science information to this field. So In retrospect, to look at what I have done, I think there's some landmark I would like to mention. The first is we pioneered the laparoscopic BBG in 1998. And even that time, Professor Mason so surprising and he flew to Taiwan. That is his last trip. He told me he will never trip abroad after this trip, but he wants to see the BBG. Then in 2005, we do a randomized trial over a mini-gastric bypass or one osmosis bypass. I think this study saved this procedure out of the garbage of American. So, and happy to see 14 years later, the Omega study have proved what our finding. So this is a procedure, not in investigation, but can be applied clinically. And we also pioneer a new procedure, single osmosis DJB, because of some gastric cancer issue. So that is a part of our work. So the recent decade, we go into diabetes treatment. So the first thing answer is the low BMI patient. So we start the first randomized trial over this topic. We look at different procedure in low BMI patients specific for diabetes treatment, and we prove it's effective. And bypass is better than sleeve in this category of a patient. And also prove the incretin effect probably is a major effect for both procedure. Then we also pioneer ABD score. It's a simple score. We can compare the patient, because if you look at the literature, the remission rate of diabetes is so various, even in procedure, in center. But I think the most of the problem is we don't compare the same group of patients. So you must use some kind of system, like we use in cancer. You must compare the right patient. So this score, I think, is very helpful for patient consultation, procedure choice, and clinical research. Then the last is recently we also identify the most high-risk group agent for diabetes is a low-onset diabetes. It's not been found in a Western country, but in Asia, about 20 to 25% of the type 2 diabetes patients are happen before age 40. This group is especially high risk for the complication and for the long-term poor outcome. So we identify this group of patients should be the priority we think about metabolic surgery to treat. So I review my career here, but I just want to say what we all learn from surgery and the goal of our study, no matter in field, actually is to help others. That means without benevolence, your life will be meaningless. I think it's a repeat being taught in all the religions. So what to say that is, when after study you become larger, substantial, you need to support all the things. When you are high and brilliant, you need to overspread all things. When it goes too far and continue long, then it makes you infinity. That is the goal of the life. So, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to conclude my talk today is I introduce Tao to everybody. It's a true nature of the universe and also for all human beings. And as a bariatric surgery, we must realize it's a blessing from heaven. However, within divine blessing, there is still many difficulties. But every difficult will serve you, turn into heal, and empower your strength. Then, after you mature, you should use your experience, follow your true nature. That's to help others to do benevolence. Then your life is meaningful. So I wish you all find eternal happy from this job. Bariatric surgery is what a wonderful blessing from the heaven. Thank you very much for your attention.
Great. Good afternoon. Thank you very much, Mr. President. Could I have my slides up? Many years ago, when I finished my medical school, I entered to the internship at the same institution where I work. I was one day on call, and I saw this patient who came to the emergency room. The patient had evident signs of massive weight loss, protein malnutrition, vitamin deficiencies, and she felt really, really bad. I went to see the record, and I found that the patient had been operated 6 years before. At that time, his age was 29, the body mass index 58, he had diabetes, high blood pressure, and hypercholesterolemia. And the surgeon did a jejunal bypass. The only thing that I knew about obesity is what I learned for 1 hour when I took endocrinology. So my first reaction was to see, how come a patient can choose an operation for something that can be controlled just by stop eating? How come a surgeon can do an operation that may have this type of results? Which hospital I chose to do my internship. So knowing that I had very little about obesity, that patient inspired me to learn more about obesity. The first thing that I learned is that we are an old-fashioned model. We were designed at the time when we needed intense physical activity to get our food. At that time, the food pyramid looked like this. Then there was the technology evolution, and also the way that we work changed. And along with these changes, the food pyramid also changed. I learned that some patients developed obesity and that some of them intense obesity, in that by definition, this was a body mass index above 40 and super obesity above 50. And that despite intensive research, there was not an effective treatment for the disease. That diet didn't work. Exercise didn't work. Psychological manipulations were not sufficient to treat the disease, and that pills were very, very ineffective for morbidly obese patients. And that's why surgeons started performing operations to control severe obesity. I learned that the first operation for morbid obesity was performed here in Spain in the 10th century. Sancho I de Leon, the nickname was El Craso, developed severe obesity, and he had to step down from the throne. He went to Cordoba, Spain, and was treated by Hadassi ibn Shaprut, who closed the lips by suturing the lips and giving only the chance to get food through a straw. He lost enough weight and went back and was crowned as a king again. Then learned that surgeons have found that massive bowel resections resulted in weight loss. And that was the beginning of developing massive bowel diversions to treat overweight or severe overweight. That in my hospital, there was a surgeon, Dr. Carlos de la Rosa, who learned the procedure and started doing these jejunal bypasses for severely obese patients. And that the patient belonged to that era where the surgical treatment was the jejunal bypass. During my residency and the first part of my professional activity, I learned that surgery evolved to a gastric or combined procedures that were less aggressive. And then some combined procedures for patients that were heavier, and then the laparoscopic came along to perform most of these procedures. Now, the main aim of the procedures at the beginning was just weight loss. but that soon surgeons found that bariatric surgery was not only effective for losing weight, but also to control diabetes. That at the beginning, all surgeons thought that the mechanisms were purely mechanical, but soon after they found that there are many hormonal and physiological mechanisms to control the disease and to control the comorbidities related to the disease. And that this led to the change from bariatric surgery to metabolic surgery. That now it's even included in the therapeutic algorithm for diabetes. That these operations can also improve other comorbidities, such as high blood pressure, hypercholesterolemia, hypertriglyceridemia, and sleep apnea. I, right now, don't feel bad about the patient, because the patient got proper treatment. Malnutrition was reversed, the vitamin deficiencies were controlled, the patient underwent a second operation where the bowel, the absorptive part of the bowel was along, and then the patient was able to eat and controlling the weight without protein malnutrition. But there is one thing that I regret. I regret for having misjudged the patient, for having misjudged the surgeon, and for having stigmatized the disease. Thank you.
That's great. Okay, let's get back to English. So first and foremost, I want to thank Dr. Ramos and IFSO for giving me the privilege and the opportunity to present here today. Second, I want to say that I dedicate this presentation to Almino, because Almino is not only a great father and husband, he's a great friend. And I was once asked, what is the most important thing that a surgeon should have? And my answer was honesty. And I think that's what Almino is all about. He's an honest individual, and he's an honest surgeon. So I woke up at 5 o'clock in the morning today because I wanted to do something special, Almino. And the title of my talk is, Why Bariatric and Metabolic Surgery is also considered oncological surgery. We want to understand the link between obesity, cancer, and metabolic interventions. Let's start with obesity and cancer. When I had the privilege to be the president of ASMBS, we conducted a national survey in the United States looking at the barriers and perceptions of the United States population when it came to the obesity disease. It was all over the place. People's Magazine, Cosmopolitan, the New York Times, Emily Calada, who is the most important reporter we have in the United States that deals with obesity, spoke about it. And what was the most surprising result was that American citizens felt that obesity was as serious as cancer, that it would affect their lives and it would affect their longevity. Well, 2016, they were not too far from the truth, because 2 years later, in the Journal of the National Cancer Institute, Dr. Moore is telling us that worldwide there are 640 million obese individuals. But more important than that, he's telling us that obesity will participate and be linked to 13 different types of cancer. United States, Europe, and the Middle East were the most affected. Why can this happen, something like that? Well, the pathophysiology is not clearly understood. They don't know if it has to do with a chronic inflammatory state. They don't know if it's a dysregulated metabolism. They don't know if metabolomics are participating in this kind of process? How about genes? The telomere gets shorter, and if the telomere gets shorter, the shorter is our life. And suddenly we started talking about the obesity pandemic. Obesity is going to be spreading around the world in the next decade. By 2030, there is an estimate that in the Asian Pacific alone, we're going to have close to 200 diabetics, most of them related to obesity. In the United States, 67 million, and the number keeps going up and up. Is there a link? Is there a relationship? Moore again showed us something that to me it was staggering, that if your blood sugar is up and you're obese, the likelihood of you developing cancer is increased by 200%. But if you lose your diabetes, it will decrease by 50%. Still a bad number to have a 50% increased chance of cancer for just being obese. Well, in 2017, the Center for Disease Control in the United States of America put up this report, Vital Signs, Trends in the Incidence of Cancer that are associated with overweight and obesity, 10 years experience. What they saw is that obesity was related to 40% of all cancers that were diagnosed during that decade. That 55% of cancers diagnosed in women and 24% of cancers diagnosed in men are linked to obesity and the obesity disease. So what's the role now of obesity, cancer, and bariatric surgery? We know very well from Ted Adams' publication in the New England Journal of Medicine, where he looked at the long-term mortality of obese patients that underwent gastric bypass and obese patients that did not undergo gastric bypass. And what he found out is that those who underwent surgery and their obesity disease were cured had a 40% decreased mortality. And those who died not only from heart disease and diabetes, they died in 60% of the cases from cancer. This is not the only signal we are getting about obesity being linked to bariatric surgery and the impact of bariatric surgery in getting patients to live longer and not dying from cancer. The Kaiser Permanente group in the West United States analyzed 10 years, hundreds of thousands of patients, and they compared those who underwent bariatric surgery versus those who were obese and did not. And they published it in the Annals of Surgery showing that there was a lower risk in the incidence of cancer. But then they went ahead and published what's the impact of losing weight with cancer. And interesting-wise, patients having bariatric surgery had a 14% cancer risk reduction for each 10% of each weight loss they had. Now, look at this number and imagine what the impact of our operation could be in someone not developing cancer if we get them to lose 50% of their excess body weight loss. And we still have to deal in the United States of America and probably worldwide, despite all the evidence that I just showed you, with these guys, the CEOs of the medical insurance that makes millions, if not billions of dollars, and don't let our patients get to the operating room because they say we don't have long-term follow-up. And we come here to this meeting and talk about our patients being in denial, having fear. We fight and have the bullfights about if the bypass or the sleeve or the mini or the maxi. And while we're doing all these discussions, Google has a company where they spend hundreds of millions of dollars called Calico. trying to find out if they can get to immortality. We just showed them that we can decrease the incidence of cancer by 70% by getting our patients to lose weight. And these guys are spending hundreds of millions in trying to get to immortality. So the question we need to ask ourselves is, what are they thinking, and what are we waiting for? There are similar scenarios when it comes to this situation. And my call to action is to all of us, because this is a global problem. From the 16th to the 19th century, scurvy killed more than 2 million sailors, more than syphilis, more than warfare, and more than shipwrecks combined. 300 years of medical experts knew how to prevent it from happening, but they didn't. In 1600, captains started distributing lemons and oranges to their sailors, and the British Navy stopped them from doing that because it was too expensive. Until in 1747, this guy, James Lind, a smart doctor, gave a group of sailors lemons, and to the other ones they gave vinegars. And the ones who were taking vinegar were dying, and the ones who were taking lemons helped them survive. Another scenario, seatbelts. This gentleman is Niels Bohlin. In 1959, he discovered seatbelts. It took us 10 years until the 1970s to implement them and make them mandatory. Asbestos exposure, the first death was recorded in 1906. 70 years later, we banned the chemical. Tom Friedman, who is a bestseller and 3 times Pulitzer Prize winner, wrote a great book. It's called Thank You for Being Late. How can we grow in an area of fast speed, progression, and growth? And he talks about 3 things that are happening worldwide. One of those is technological disruption, the other one is climate change and nuclear war. And then he says that Mother Nature is a great example. When he talks to Mother Nature says he or she adapts to everything. But when we were asked to stop doing this or stop doing that, we said, we'll do it tomorrow. And he said, tomorrow is too late. And for our patients with obesity, to do it tomorrow and have them die from cancer, it's going to be too late too. Yuval Harari, who wrote also 2 great books, says that there is not a problem because we are adapting. Humankind are adapting to this change, to this rapid speed in technology disruption, in AI, and that there is, instead of a natural selection, an intelligent design. And we're going to become cyborgs in the future. Well, 40 years ago in the United States, CDC told us that we were getting fatter. And nowadays, America, 80% of the United States adults are considered obese or overweight. 1/3 of our kids are considered overweight. And these numbers are worldwide. They're staggering, and they keep going up. Obesity is reaching proportions that we've never seen before. Just my final thoughts. In 2012, there were 56 million people that died worldwide. 620,000 of those died from violence. War killed 120,000. Crime killed 500,000. 800 committed suicide, but diabetes was the #1 killer. 1.5 million deaths. More people are dying nowadays from obesity than from starvation. And while humanity has managed to overcome famine, plague, and wars, a pandemic of obesity continues to grow and spread. And sugar today is killing more people than powder. We are our own worst enemies. We come to this wonderful meeting and would like to talk about surgery and the microbiome and about diabetes and the SADI, the sleeve, or the mini. But my call to action today is that we need to talk more about obesity and cancer. Thank you very much.
Great. Luigi.
Hello. Hello. Just let me do a brief introduction. I think that Almino has revitalized this society with the Viagra injection and has made my summer very special. I've been thinking of this presentation a lot, and I thought to tell you what basic feeling of somebody who has been a surgeon like me over the last 40 years, who I am and what do I want to achieve. I think these are fundamental questions in the life of a man or a person. And as you can see by this picture, is when I was a medical student, that was taken in the Bay of Naples in the 80s. And one of the things when I was dreaming, when I was sleeping, my dreams were very often referring to the fly, to the possibility that I could fly. I don't know if because I like to jump and dive into the sea, but I always have been dreaming, and I dream that I can fly. I have the perfect conscience that it's not possible to fly for a man like this, but I always had this dream. And one of the dreams I had when I started to do advanced laparoscopy is to treat impossible case and to get involved in very difficult technical situation. And is this possible? I mean, was it feasible at that time to treat a patient like this? I had a recent case, is a woman that is from the Amalfitana coast, that severely obese, 64 BMI with a lot of comorbidity that I operate. She was very big. She developed she was operated by sleeve gastrectomy, and she went very well because she came down to BMI 38, 90 kilogram, and she looked very nice. But as we all know, she regained weight, and she came to me again with BMI 53, and so the situation was classic. The patient was doing well, but after regained weight. And in November, I decided to revise her, and I am part of a trial in Italy with Maurizio De Luca, and I decided that that was a good case to do an advanced omega loop bypass, the so-called SAGI operation. And initially she went very well, but she has been in hospital for many months after that for severe malnutrition and sarcopenia and weight loss. And I thought at some stage I was going to lose her, and I was feeding jejunal feeding, IV feeding, enteral, whatever possible to recuperate on her. I had the clear impression for 6 months that any time I was going in to revise the patient, the tissue were too frail, too fragile. The patient was very weak, and you cannot make any surgical operation on a patient like this. But at some stage, what I thought was the best for her I could achieve, but as you can see, it was a very poor condition. I revised her. I revised very simply. Technically, it was very simple to do this and to convert in a Roux-en-Y the so-called standard short limb operation. And she went well, and finally she recuperated her strength. She was no more asthenic, and she came to visit me in my hospital. As you can see in the back, I have a beautiful picture of an actress, a famous Italian actress with a perfect shaped body. And I always say to the patient that come to me, look, we do bariatric surgery, but you will never be like this lady in the back. But at that time, I was very happy that this patient survived. So I still, when I sleep, I still dreaming of flying. And this was a more recent dive and jump in Capri, and still, perhaps at this age, I am 60 this year, you make some reflection on the mission we have in our life, and you want to know really who you are, so who the surgeon is, because at the end of the day, this is what I do. So is the surgeon a manual worker, a craftsman, a missionary, an artist, a martyr? Because I think we differently by many other possible job or work, this is a very complicated area that we work in. And being a surgeon, if you are really involved, is emotionally very difficult, and you always bring back, overnight you think back of what you have done during the day, and you have the step of the operation, and occasionally you don't know if this was the operation you had done yesterday or 3 days ago, and you think, oh, maybe that stitch I could have put in another way. On the other hand, I'm almost sure that to be a surgeon, you must be also a little bit a predator. You must be aggressive, and occasionally when you do fighting, scuba diving without oxygen, you may decide to fight with an octopus with your hands. But if you are, and this is a quite fair fight with an octopus. At the end of the day, I think that the surgeon in this era, especially in bariatric, remain the lion in the forest. I would say the lion in the forest of surgery. Perhaps we can limit it to obesity, although doing obesity, we face a lot of other complicated occurrence, emergency that can happen in this patient. And this is what was stimulated by Scott Chicora regarding a paper was published that was limiting the possibility of doing malabsorptive surgery in bariatric. I think malabsorptive has a place, but we need to study to find out when is appropriate. And I still think that when we come to this meeting, this was the last Tuesday morning, the IFSO Board of Trustees of 2019, we are lone wolves. We are lions that have been fighting and living a happy but also a difficult life. And you see all these people here that have been president of IFSO. Most of us, we come here because at the end of the day in our profession, we are alone. We need to talk with people that are like us. If I talk with Raul, with Vijay, I know that we share the same perplexity, the same emotion, and I think I wanted to share with you this sense of solidarity in between our professional. And I think bariatric surgery is effective, but sometimes it's dangerous, and I think we should have a limitation. My message in this talk is to say, okay, technology improve, knowledge improve. You can do many things, but there are some patients that should not be considered or should be treated with very limited kind of procedure because it might be dangerous for them to have surgery. And I think this is the most difficult part of being a surgeon. Perhaps I got there now, I'm 60, but my message was toward the youngest. Perhaps when you start achieving, collecting your experience, at some stage you feel you can do everything, but you must have a limitation. Let me conclude with another very important event in my life. While I was president of the society, I had the pleasure of meeting Dalai Lama. And this is another very important part because we must reflect regarding the possibility of being compassionate and charitable regarding the people who seek help toward us. And I think, although I am Christian Catholic, this guy talked to me very easily and sent the message to me that you need to have a simple human, practical philosophy of living. And I was very much impressed by meeting the Dalai Lama. And finally, let me thank Antonio Torres that with Almino has organized such a beautiful Congress. Thank you very much for your attention.
Great. I think today was a chance to see some different presentation from these guys, because if you want to know how they treat a leak, how they manage some complication, you can read the articles. But what we have here are the way of thinking, the way of prepare something different that it's much easier, and I told this to Mary, it's much easier to come here and to talk about leaks in sleeve gastrectomy. But when we have to construct some thinking about something different and try to link also to obesity and metabolic surgery, because we are here for discuss this. But I think that was a great section. Thank you. I hope you have liked the session we had here. Please, a big applause to the guys that present here. And thank you for joining us. See you later.